Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
What's going on, man?
Oh, I'm kind of droning out right now, man.
Does that mean you're tired?
No. We're going to talk about drone
Does that
startups
mean, like,
today.
does your wife, like, remotely control you now?
Yeah, that's
Or can I remotely control you?
Been going on for years, and you will never control me. So, but unless you acquire Jill somehow, I don't even want to start that subject.
I'll work on this.
But yeah, I'm droning out today. I'm ready to get after it. And once again, the timeliness of our moods and the topics seem to have drawn themselves to an intersection. But with us today, we've got PJ Piper, who's the CEO of Aware Vehicles. PJ, what's up?
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm doing well. I said I was droning out, but you do have a drone startup. And for those of you that are listening, well, first off, this episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io. We can help you build a software team quickly and affordably. But while you're listening and checking out Fullscale.io, you can also go to awarevehicles.com. That's recommended, right?
Yeah.
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 So as we get started, we know you from being part of the Launch KC, and that's launchkc.org if you want to check it out, of their clean tech cohort. And you have a drone company, is this correct?
Yeah. So the Launch KC did the program with Black & Veatch, and we were a part of that. We've been working on adding autonomy to precision agriculture and infrastructure, and in particular using drones, advanced imaging, and artificial intelligence. Actually, it's really the combination of all three where you can get the benefit of each of those.
So let's go back a little bit and give a little backstory about how you got into all this and how you figured out there was a problem worth solving.
Well, the last few companies I've been involved in, I've had a great mentor / technical advisor, kind of a Boeing research and development guy. And so he introduced me to my first company after I left banking to start in Boston. And that was a nanotechnology. It was basically like a high-performance insulation. And he came to me and said, hey, the technology works. We'd love to use it, but we're not going to build a company and become an insulation company. That's not what we do, right? So as a technology scout, he liked to connect people. And so he connected me with them, started that company. That went all the way through. That's IPO. This same guy introduced me to a motor development guy, or basically a guy in his garage here in the Kansas City area. And that's what brought me here. But he, about 4 years ago or so, said, the drone technologies are awesome, and they're doing a lot. But at some point, they have to solve the last yard in drone autonomy, which is somebody needs to figure out how to make them land, recharge, bring off all the data, communicate it out without anybody touching it. So people have developed a lot of really great technology. Even in the last few years, it's been amazing what they've been able to do with taking off and route planning and taking pictures and all the rest of this. But because they've been designed for consumers, they didn't bother with those last steps because they figured, okay, well, whoever buys it, they can go pick up the drone. They can, plug
There would
it
be
in.
a pilot.
Yeah, there'd be a pilot.
Yeah.
They can plug it in. They can take out a SIM card and get their pictures off. And we don't have to deal with that. It's an additional cost, and we're competing with other drone companies that want to shave another $100 off. We don't want to add any additional expense. But ultimately, for it to commercialize in the industrial space and a lot of the business applications, you're going to need to take that fully autonomous solution, because right now, if you're a farmer, you don't have 3 days to gather the data and to send it to somebody else and have them analyze it and give you insights. You really need it right away, because if that plant needs more or less water, fertilizer, or pesticides, you really need to know now, because there's probably larva on the bottom side of that leaf or something
Well,
like that.
this is an evolutionary thing, right? So it was cutting edge if I'm a farmer to be able to use a drone to see from an overhead view how my crops are doing. And they could manually fly the drone and do all that. And that was probably a game changer for them. But now it's also a lot of labor and expense to pay somebody to fly that drone, right? So the next step is figuring out, okay, how do I automate that?
Right.
So I don't have to pay somebody to go out and do this once a week or every day or whatever.
Right. So we had a project with the National Science Foundation. We outlined this opportunity to make it more autonomous and everything. And as part of that, they've got a great system of saying, you need to do 100 customer interviews. You need to get out and talk to the farmers and really understand through customer discovery, what are your pain points, what do you really need? And what we found was that, they've got satellite imagery, then they've got airplane imagery, and then they've got drone imagery. And the satellites are probably the easiest, but they're the lowest resolution, right? So they'll give you a general idea.
Well, how up to date is that?
Well, it needs to not be cloudy. So if you go through an extended period of clouds, you're probably not getting all that many.
But can they get a real-time satellite view?
Yeah, but the satellites are always,
Mm-hmm.
hurtling around, right? So you might get daily, but again, it has to be clear, right?
That's still pretty cool that you can even do that.
You can, and the price has gone down. Elon Musk, they're shooting up more satellites every day, right? So that's helpful with that. But when you're getting that resolution of, each pixel is 15 meters, or, that's really advanced compared to what it was a little bit ago. You can't really tell what's going on. And what I think a lot of the farmer input was like, hey, we totally buy that there's something here. And we know that when it's color-coded red, that crop is stressed, right? And so they'll go out and they'll look at it. The problem is that the data isn't timely enough, and so it's already dead. And so they're kind of like, well, that's great, but we want to know 2 days before it's going to die what to do.
Well,
So
and if
we
you're
can
looking at
actually
it from that high up, you're going to have to see a lot of bad pixels before you see a trend, right? Because it can't be like a few plants are stressed. It's going to be a bunch of them so that the satellite
Well, there's
image can
there's
pick
a
up.
number of things, man. So this is also one thing we didn't mention is this has also replaced the helicopter.
Yeah.
In some regards. So my uncle and my cousin own very large ranches in Texas. They're anywhere from 1,600 to 3,200 acres. And you can't cover all that. And there's a lot of different things that they face as ranchers that are problematic. And it could be everything from broken fence lines to like dry. So in West Texas, it's hot. And they literally dig ponds. And like sometimes it's hard to figure out if they're dry or whatever, all these different things that can be going on. And they're trying to keep track of it. And it's just too much space to cover. And so they literally used to fly over with helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a way to look at it. And that still works for some stuff. But I mean, dude, let's be realistic. Like, I mean, how's your helicopter running today, Matt?
Like they got to do a weekly scouting report.
You got to have a pilot. You got to
Mm-hmm.
do all this stuff. There's maintenance. I mean, these are just not very practical things. Yeah. And now in some regards that, and there's all kinds of different issues that they run into, and they've used drones a little bit. And then maybe just like, I don't know, some of it's just, I don't know.
Well, the problem is you have to manually fly them.
Yeah.
So it's still a lot of work.
Well, it's expensive.
And
to
humans are not very accurate.
And helicopters aren't cheap.
Yeah.
And neither are small planes or any of that stuff. And like 3,200 isn't like massive acreage, but for a farmer growing crops, 3,200 acres is not even that big, is it?
Right. Well, and I think what's so interesting is when we went out and we talked to people where, we're thinking, coming out of the labs, hey, this crop stress, we're going to be able to tell each ear of corn how to get the best out of that and all the rest of that. And we, we're talking to people and they'd listen for a while. They'd be like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Hey, can you count cattle?
Yeah, sure.
And they were literally, I would say 8 out of 10 farmers always got to that at some point. Can you count cattle? We're like, yeah, why is that big deal? Well, they're like, well, when you're standing on the ground.
You can't.
And you're trying to count these cattle. Like somebody who's really good can maybe count up to 30 cattle. But
Well,
they
that's
said
the thing
anybody
too,
who
is
thinks
you can count the same ones a bunch.
Well,
like,
they're moving.
Yeah.
Right? So they go
Yeah.
in front, they go behind. They say
Yep.
anybody who thinks they can count more than 100 cattle is just flat out lying to you.
Yeah, my
They're
cousin.
just
So my
different.
cousin is the ranch keeper at all these ranches. I mean, that's what he does. It's his job, and like he'll tell you the same thing. He'll be
Right.
like, and they have cows, and they also have like large game, elk, deer, or whatever, all this stuff. But they have no clue. I mean, unless you're gonna like tag every single one of them, and then you really do need you. I mean, you have to tranquilize an animal and put a tracking chip.
Well,
in
that
it,
is
like-
that is a technology, but the
Yeah, and
amazing
that's not easy.
the
either.
amazing thing to me is that how they're currently doing it. They rustle. They like get 6 cowboys on horseback, and they
Yep.
get them all into a corner, and they let them out one by one.
Okay, I have
It's
a
like
question for you.
1840s technology.
Yeah.
So can you count cattle?
We can with the drone. There's a
That's
lot
pretty
of
cool.
there's a lot of really cool software that you can add in where it's almost like biometric identification, and you can track that cow as it walks around too.
Oh,
So
really?
it's really cool.
And
Yeah.
computer
A
vision,
lot
some
of-
stuff like
A
cool stuff
lot
like
of,
that.
A lot of computer vision.
Some of that's even open source, man.
Can you
Just
count
gotta
my
figure-
chickens too?
I suspect we probably could, unless they're going inside. If they're inside outside, you might lose track.
Chickens might be easier to count.
Yeah.
But you look at some of this stuff, and you talk about cattle. I don't think people really realize like how expensive and large and valuable.
Each head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like you don't want to lose them, man.
Oh yeah, it's like
there's- I
$1,000
mean,
bucks a
that's
head at least,
yeah.
and it can wander off, and a lot of times it's calving or it's something.
That's a lot. There's a
It's
lot
kinda-
of different stuff. The problem, one of the things they've got a big issue with on the ranch, and this is kind of spreading, is feral hogs.
Mm.
These are a mix between a boar and a domestic pig, and they wreak havoc
Yeah.
on ranches because they go underneath fences. They kill stuff. They are just ravenous. They are not. They are a nuisance.
Right.
And some of what those aerial views will let you know, like, because you don't know where they're living and
Right.
like all this different stuff, and they really do destroy stuff. I think that my cousin, the majority of his day, is spent repairing things that these hogs ruin.
Sure.
They want to shoot them.
So how
Whenever
have
they can too, yeah.
how have the kind of field studies of this worked out for your customers?
So pretty well, and we've got a lot more coming up. So one of the nice things about the Ignite X competition or cohort, I guess that was the Black and Veatch Launch KC,
Okay.
the name for it. One of the key things with that was that Black and Veatch has a bunch of different construction opportunities, projects ongoing at any given point in time, and they want to be able to do project management. And so they'll have on these renewable fields, you've got a solar field, you're going to put in panels across the whole thing. It's maybe 500 acres, right? And they've got a whole bunch of panels, and so they've got to put in poles to put the panels on, and so they'll end up putting 50,000 poles just in place, across these fields. And there's a whole bunch of things that they have to track. They have how many are going in each day, and at the end of the day, you want to get it so that you can complete your project faster, because either there's penalties on the back end or there's bonuses on the front
Right.
end, and it's becoming more and more competitive in this field to win these deals. And so if you're going to say, hey, I can do this in 5 months, everybody else is in 6 months, they say, why? Well, we've got this great technology. We can actually track a lot more accurately. We're getting out there. We're not losing a day because it's too muddy in that field because my drone flew yesterday and I know I'm going to put the arrays in field 1, not field 2 today. And that way I'm not going to get stuck. I just saved myself a week, on these things. So there's so many things that it goes to Matt's point. It's not just often the thing you originally go out for, but it's all these secondary impacts that eye in the sky can provide that otherwise on land you just can't get that.
My first experience with drones was actually I used to own an office building, and there was a large, like 40-acre lot that was next to it, and a company that owned materials, we'll say, like anything from whatever they had piled up, like the equivalent of about 500,000 bags of unbagged mulch right behind my building. And I was like, man, there's no way they can do this. And I had no idea to get the scope of all of it. And I actually I asked them to do something about it and asked the city to do something about it. And I actually ended up hiring a drone company to come, and it was a local company, and they came, and I was so impressed with what this thing did. And this was a large drone. I mean, it was like this almost like 4 feet wide kind of thing. And
Yeah.
this dude lifted this thing off from my, and Mike, what's up? He lifted it up and it flew a grid. Like, I mean, it went a bunch of ways sideways and went the other way and just like, and it ended up doing.
Mapped it all out.
It mapped it all out. It did volumetric calculations.
Yep.
It did like temperature, all this stuff. And they were able, it was so accurate that he was able to say like, okay, there is this much there. And then the more important thing that it did was it mapped out that this company had 99% of their material outside of the environmental boundary that they were supposed to exist in. Big no-no. And so I sent that off to the city, and I'd love to tell you that the city of Overland Park gave a shit. They did for about an hour and kind of got back to whatever they aren't doing. But overall, you know, like I was so impressed with what the drone, like, I mean, it did a ton, man. And so, but they ran that through, what was it, Drone Deploy?
Yeah.
So, which is a common, I think, a pretty popular
Yeah, it's a
third-party software platform where you can bring your stuff in from the drone. So how does stuff like that apply to what you guys are doing? Do you use technology like that, or is it something that you have to build completely
Right.
from
Proprietary.
scratch?
So
Yeah.
what we're, you know, it's great that those are available, because I think we don't like to recreate the wheel. If there's something that's out there
Sure.
that somebody can just use, that's great. What's interesting to us is that there are so many applications that we're finding out that the timeliness of the data is the key. So the data is the key. In almost all the areas that we're working in, data is always like the number one thing you need.
Oh, and by the way, that wasn't fast. It took several days, much to your point
correct.
earlier. Like
Correct.
it took, like, it had to piece it all together. It took a while.
They have to do all this. So
Yeah.
so the beauty of our docking platform. So our technology is we created a docking platform that we can use machine vision. So right now, drones, you know, as I said, from a consumer basis, they just have them land near the operator. They pick them up. They do that. So they use GPS. GPS is good within about a yard. Okay. So when we get within that cone of about a yard, we switch over to machine vision so we can recognize the platform specifically, so it can land on a dime. We want to target about a centimeter of target. So when we land, it can autonomously use a robotic arm to plug in, download all the data, and then all our computing is done right there on the platform. And the reason this is so critical is if you're in the middle of a farm in Kansas, or you're, you know, in Overland, wherever it might be, you might not have 5 bars of connectivity. And one of the biggest challenges with these things is just transferring this data. So the raw images can be gigabytes worth of data, right? And so you can't realistically transfer all that data. But if you had them all right there on the platform, it does all the software algorithms right there. Then you can transmit a 0.5 megabyte file.
Yeah, it's just the results.
It's just the results.
Here's-
It's just the
There were
report.
7 cattle.
Exactly.
One number.
Or hey,
13 chickens, 7 cattle,
right.
3 wild boars, and a naked dude running through the field.
And that was probably you.
No,
Right.
it was you skinny dipping in the pond.
Hey, man, that's why I'm out in the middle of my own ranch.
Yeah.
And so our goal in the ag space was to actually have these things reside on the top of a combine or a tractor, and as it's going down the field 9 miles an hour, it would basically be hovering out 50 meters in front of the vehicle, analyzing every plant. And with advanced imaging now, we can tell just by the reflectance off a plant's leaf.
I see in my head all these like red sweeping lasers.
Well, there's no lasers. You don't need the lasers, but the imaging.
I've watched too many sci-fi movies.
There's no doubt.
I know. But basically, you can get that back, and in real time, all of these tractors have already been outfitted with individual nozzles, so they can literally spray each corn stalk differently. So as they're going across, you can cover acres and acres and acres, and you would be literally treating as if, you know, you were a farmer out there individually choosing each one to give water to.
I would think that the temperature readings would be important to farmers, because, like, if obviously in the middle of the summer, especially with climate change and all that, just, you know, if your crops dry up, like you said, you don't have 3 days to address that. You got to get some water on these things, because they can happen in a hurry.
Right. So what we found out, we don't have to be like constantly hovering, but if you go once a day, you would just be immensely better off than where you are.
So a big part of the key innovation here is figuring out all the algorithms and the data processing and actually doing that in the field.
A big part of that is that the other point is
Because
just
the imagery and everything is too much data to upload from a remote location.
Absolutely. In fact, the communications thing on this stuff is fascinating, especially as we start thinking about how are they going to roll out 5G? Where are these nodes going to reside? And we're already talking about, having one of these docks every 1,000 feet or whatever around. And so it's really, there's a lot of really interesting synergies.
You really have to have that many
on
of
the
these docks?
communication. You wouldn't need to, and in fact, you wouldn't need a drone at every dock, right? So if you've got 20 minutes of flight time, you could go around a certain area, land on another nest, go to another one, kind of flip around.
It's not like the B-2 bomber where it flies all the way there and all the way back.
No, well, it can. Right now, most of ours do.
But if you got to cover thousands of acres, then it
if you
still
got to
doesn't
cover
matter.
a lot of space, you need.
Not going to make it all the way to the end.
Correct.
Well, I think one of the things, you talk about the pilot aspect and, like the autonomy of being able to keep up with this stuff. Like you go back to like this fictional or real ranch or farm that's in the middle of nowhere. Like some of these rural populations don't have.
There's no pilot.
Yeah, well, there's also a small number of people that are.
There's like your goofy uncle that thinks he can drive the pilot.
Well, maybe
he runs it into
maybe
the barn.
you can, but the thing is these people on these folks that are on the farms, they are literally working from sun up to sundown,
They got shit to
doing
do.
a gazillion things.
And you know what? Most of them have a drone.
Yeah.
They went out about 3-4 years ago. Everybody convinced them, you got to get a drone. You got to get a drone. They'll show me their drone.
Yeah.
Said, when do you fly? We never fly.
Right.
We tried to for a while, but the problem is you need it to be repeated data over a repeated spot. It's kind of boring in some ways.
Well,
Yeah.
right.
Kind of
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. It's not
Yeah.
the kind of thing that's
No,
That's
humans
super
are not
fun to do.
very good at repetitive, mundane tasks.
Correct.
And that's what this is. It's like every week or every day or whatever, go fly this perfect grid,
right.
download all this data,
Oh, and
upload
then
it to
interpret it.
computer,
Interpret it.
stare at it for hours,
Right.
then read it, and then now what?
Well, then you're also talking about
It needs
getting.
to be actionable. Tell me what to do.
Although they don't care at all about drones. They want to know, do I need to water my
Yeah,
plants?
what
yeah,
to do.
Right.
Tell me
And
what
do I need to
that
do?
was the point
Just
that I
tell
was
me
going to
this.
make is you're trying. I think anytime you ask people you have a major roadblock in the path of progress when you're asking people to do things that are well out of their comfort zone. And I'm not actually. Farmers are far more technologically progressive than most people think.
Oh, if you look at tractors
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
they're like night and day
Right.
to even 5 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
all of them use precision
Yep.
guidance.
Yep.
And so they're going out. A lot of times, the farmer's sitting in the cab, mainly just to provide situational awareness. In
Yep.
other words, there's no kid that came running across in front, so
Yeah.
he needs to stop it, right? Well, if you had these drones flying over, it could identify any of those hazards, and now you could take the farmer out of the cab.
So once again, if you're listening, you can go check out awarevehicles.com. You can learn more about what they do. Also, when I was out last week was Black and Beach's demo night for clean technology, and you were a part of that. So I'm going to post some pictures of the actual drone on the platform.
Great.
And that way the listening world
Sure.
can have a better understanding of what we're talking about. Now, the actual drone itself, these are things that you could buy that at a store, right?
Yeah, we get these off the shelf.
Right. The platform, not so much.
No. You
And
can't
that's
get
something that
That's
you
ours.
guys have built.
Yeah.
So how do you build that? Does it have like a little Raspberry Pi computer in it? Like how do you build this?
We
thing?
have used Raspberry Pi. We use NVIDIA right now. So TX2 is basically a high-performance computer. It's more powerful than the computer you're using now. We basically got it in there, and it can do all the advanced imaging, machine vision, all the algorithms. We like to say you can have all the artificial software in the world, but if you don't have the data to feed it,
Yeah, sure.
you're not going to be able
So
to
these
drive any.
so these little platforms have got to be a little expensive for them.
Actually not. So the cool thing is, the drone world used to be completely dominated by DJI. I mean, arguably it still is, right? 70% market share of all drones are DJI in the prosumer segment. A few companies more recently have realized, hey, that we should do something similar. So you got Parrot out of France, you've got Skydio as a newer one in the United States, and they've made more basically similar platforms but cheaper, with a little bit better features on different things. And I think the key thing that they're doing, I kind of think back to that Betamax versus VHS. Why, if Betamax was better, why did it fail? Well, they didn't make their platform open, right? And
Right.
so these other drone companies, because they're the number 2, number 3, are saying, well, why don't we work with the technologists who are going to develop something better rather than assume we can do all that ourselves, right? We're not as close to the field as they are. They're
Well,
in the
it's
field.
one
they're
thing to
doing these
build
things.
the vehicle and the hardware and it can fly and all that, but it's like, now what do people do with it?
Right.
And you need to build all the software,
Right.
like what you do, to
Yep.
actually make this thing usable.
Yep. Yeah. And so a lot of it's, system integration. And it's kind of picking your spots, but at the end of the day, we're solving that last yard in drone
So
autonomy.
the challenge that you have is you're going to have to build conceivably thousands and thousands of your landing platforms, right? And they're going to get installed in the middle of nowhere in all these places. How do you update your software on these platforms?
So
That sounds like a fun challenge.
So these platforms are all connected just like your computer's connected to the internet, right? So all of them are connected. So if there's any kind of software update, I can do that remotely. I could do it from here. I could do it from my phone.
You can push software updates.
Yeah, we can push software to that. I think an interesting thing is, again, all those farmers who bought a drone, they don't want to buy another drone. They don't want to buy a platform. They don't want to buy any of that stuff. So, we're gearing toward drone as a service, where it's basically just, look, we're going to provide that insight to you. We're just going to tell you when to water your plants.
So you're going to basically lease them a new drone and the new platforms?
They'll just have a subscription to find out data on their field.
And you'll provide all the...
We'll just provide the data.
Okay.
Just give us access to a spot where we can plug our things in.
That's another nightmare, is if you have to integrate with all these different drones and make all these different drones
Yeah, they don't want to deal with
work with your platform.
Right.
and-
Well, not if they make it a turnkey process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you guys provide everything, then...
I think that's a smart
But, I
approach.
mean, that would be your
yeah.
challenge, is going to his family ranch. Like, we have these 17 drones in the closet. Make them work with your
From
stuff.
7 years ago, which
Yeah.
doesn't even
as
have.
as a person who thinks about selling stuff all day, I think that's really smart, because you probably eliminated a massive amount of objections.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, just like
For
on
sure.
the way to getting in.
Well,
like,
if you're like, hey, I'm just gonna say like $5,000 a month, you come in, you install this shit, and I get that one report a day or a week that tells me
Right.
if something is useful to me, and you guys do all the rest of it, perfect.
Well, I mean,
Right.
the amount of advance is astounding. So you've got a 10,000-year-old industry, agriculture, right? And they've been incrementally advancing every year. And
maybe older. 10,000 might be a
yeah,
little short,
I mean,
but yeah.
as far as written records, right?
Yeah, right.
So, you're looking at a thing where people are saying, okay, it's a really competitive, tough market to be in, right? And so they want an advantage. Well, they've already proven in the lab that they can increase crop yields. If you were to treat every plant individually, you can increase crop yields by 3 times.
They want an advantage, but they don't want more shit to do.
No, they don't want any more to do. But
Yeah.
if you can say, hey, look, I can take your crop yield, from 500 bushels, or from 150 bushels to 500 bushels in the same acreage. Well, wow, you've got a lot of room to play with, right?
Problem
and
is-
maybe even I could do it like a tax deal where I say, I'm just going to split the benefit with you.
The problem is there's probably 50 different vendors that all promise that thing for different reasons. Like, we used to joke about this when we worked in the car industry. Like, every vendor would be like, you can sell 3 more cars a month. And like
Sure.
100 vendors would all walk by with all these different widgets and all these different tools. And you're like,
Hey, Matt.
I could sell 1,000 cars a month if I bought all these tools.
I have a question for you, and I don't know the answer. How big is a bushel?
I have no idea.
How big is a bushel? Do you know?
Bushels of corn are different from bushels of soybeans, and it's kind of a general.
So really,
generalized unit of
I didn't
that.
realize that.
Yeah.
I always just picture a barrel.
I thought it was 17 square feet.
What?
You'd need some kind of a cubic.
Dude, you want to talk about making stuff up?
Cubic feet. I'm sorry, cubic feet. Cubic.
Okay, first off, that'd be a lot. That would be a lot. Like, cubic
know.
feet or yards?
My bushels are pretty big. Bigger than yours, I guess.
I'm not going to get into that. So, I think this is a classic sell more, spend less deal.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as and I've said this a million times on the show, but, there's 3 simple ways to have a very successful business: sell more, spend less, or do both. And if you can increase the yield of what you're putting out and lower the cost. Now, I think so much of what you're doing makes a lot of sense to farmers as well, because there are, if you talk to any farmer or anybody that's in agriculture, they will talk about their amazing yield years, and they will talk about the years everything died.
Yeah.
It's not the
flood,
it's not the middle.
the
Well,
heat.
that's it. There's flooding, there's heat, there's
Mhm.
there's different kinds of disease. Like there's all different kinds of stuff. Now, when you're dealing with 10,000 acres or just these massive plots of land, that's a shitload of seeds. And
Right.
like they're trying to get them in the ground, and like I mean, well, Nebraska last year was basically half the state was flooded. So if you had, if you plant your seeds, they get washed out. The plants die just as quickly from too much moisture as they do from not enough.
Well, this is to your point about, well, why do they want to trust us, right?
Well,
why would they want to look into?
My point, jokingly, is there's like 10 vendors that will combine. Like Monsanto will be like, if you use our seeds and our
Right.
this, then you'll get more, and
Right.
use my,
Right. So we're
whatever.
not-
like
so-
there's all these different people that are all.
So we don't try to say we're better than Monsanto. We want to team with Monsanto.
Yeah.
We want to go out them and there with them and basically say, hey, we're going to do these demos under a National Science Foundation project with Raven Industries, with Monsanto, and basically prove to the farmers, hey, we're going to do a couple of really high-profile demonstrations. This is what their actual case was, and they can do some fields with it, some without.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same year. You're not dealing with a
For you, it's all
biblical
about case
flood.
studies.
It's
You know,
case
building
studies.
case
You got to
studies,
do the case
proving
studies,
it.
and so you're going to get buy-in as soon as those case studies start rolling out.
Yeah.
And I think there's already an intuitive nature of what we're doing where people have proven a lot of the components individually already. People just haven't wrapped
Yeah.
it all together, and
So-
so I think that's our advantage. Look, timing is everything. It's
So
a startup.
what have been some of your biggest challenges with this? Have you had issues we were talking about earlier where you have to build this and then go deploy it in the middle of a field in Kansas and then you have a bunch of problems with it and you're like, oh shit, what kind of challenges have you had
Oh,
as
yeah,
you develop the product?
Everything breaks when you're prototyping.
Oh yeah.
That or people have, when you're in startup mode, you're trying to beg, borrow, and steal for people's time to
Yeah.
develop stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a part-time this, part-time that, because I can't hire the top-level engineer for every different discipline that we're using. I mean, we're doing mechanical, electrical,
Yeah.
AI,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these things, right? So I gotta have a little bit of somebody's time, and then when something in that category goes wrong, now I'm delayed,
Yeah.
right? And I gotta, kind of do that. So, look, we have all the challenges every other startup does, right? And
You
so,
also have to deal with hardware.
well,
And that's always a challenge.
yeah,
And flying hardware.
right. Well, fortunately, a lot of the flying hardware parts, like I said, we're getting off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right. So we're dealing with stuff that's fairly terrestrial, which is advantageous. A
Do
little
you
bit easier.
Do you think you can help Elon Musk land those rockets too within a centimeter?
By the way, I didn't realize that. I was watching the National Geographic series Mars.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the big part about the big whoop about getting back and forth to Mars is being able to like make the rocket reusable. I'd never
so
thought
much
about
expense.
Sure.
that. So they have to be able to fire it up and then have it come back down. And I was watching some videos that are in there that should like
It's
that.
pretty incredible.
Apparently
is
not
incredible.
so easy.
No.
No.
I don't
They were
even-
landing on a boat in the water.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing, or
I don't know.
or a platform similar to what you're
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now that might be a little different than a drone.
It's a little different.
I don't think that drones
Several
have
ton
like.
rocket.
I don't think we have to calculate blast force,
Right.
or make
Right.
sure that we have now you
But
get
wind is a big deal, though.
now you get
It's a
into
huge
your
deal.
well that's a big deal with drones too.
That's
Sure
what I
is.
mean, the wind
Yeah.
and the drones.
Yeah.
Another example of what goes wrong in the field.
Yeah. So how do you see this going forward? Like, obviously, there's great uses of this in agriculture. You even talked about, like, construction sites.
Yep.
The one that is a little dear to my heart I always think of, I don't know if I mentioned you this before, was, like, car dealers.
Yeah.
If you're a car dealer and you have several acres of cars, you don't have any idea where the hell any of them are.
Yeah.
Where is that 2017 black Mustang? This dude wants to buy it. No idea. They don't know.
Well, very similar application. One of the universities asked us, "Hey, can you just fly around and tell us where all the cars are so we know who's illegally parked
Yeah,
by
there you go.
time and kind of basically just track that?" Oh, and by the way,
I
while
would have
you're
been
up,
screwed in college.
you're right.
Can you issue parking tickets too?
Probably.
And you could figure out which cars are there. You could have them each have a little RFID on the back of the car, and you could immediately
Yeah.
do it. The other thing that would be kind of cool is you could build an app real easily and say, "Hey, you know what? We know where all the open spots are too."
Yes.
So when you're getting to work late, maybe there's a spot or two. I don't know
Well,
if there is. Well, we'll tell you exactly where it is, and if you've got the app, you're going to get it.
Well, think about Disney World and directing people where to park.
Oh, for sure.
Like, oh, this lot's full.
Yeah.
There's a million usages for this kind of stuff,
Eye in the
which
sky.
is really cool.
It's
I
amazing.
watched Star Wars with my kids over the weekend, just the second one.
Did it have those red sweeping lasers I was talking about?
No, well, no, but
No.
I did notice that, like, this futuristic scenario, like the drones were doing so much stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I knew we were recording this today, and I was like, yeah, this. I mean, you think about it. I mean, it's pretty inevitable, and like they've literally scripted out the future scenario there where autonomous stuff is a key.
Yeah, you could send drones to other planets.
Well, we already do.
Yeah.
Do you know what's
But
not
his software can
Do you
do
know
that.
what's not autonomous and what cannot be done with a drone?
Play mixtape.
Plain mixed.
I bet you could with some AI.
Probably.
Yeah.
They could probably come up with better answers than you get on
That's
most
for sure.
days. So, you ready to play mixtape, PJ? Are you prepared?
Not really. I'll give it my best.
I always ask people that because I'm trying to gauge, like, how much time do I need to buy this person to really get in here? So I've pulled a card from the mixtape deck, and if you want to go to mixtapethegame.com, buy a copy. It's a lot of fun. By the way, great holiday gift, and I would get it in hand and unwrapped before you're around your family for the holidays.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. The theme song to the sitcom based on your life. I kind of want to answer the theme song to Three's Company, but I know that that's not accurate. The theme song based on the sitcom about your life. God, this is deeper than it sounds for one sentence. I'm going to go with, do you have an answer?
I'm going to go with LMFAO shots.
What does that sound like?
It's the song at the sporting game they always do when they're doing the kicks. It's like shot, 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 shot.
You don't even really drink. Where's the shot, shot, shot come from?
I don't know. I just like the song.
So it's become
Yeah.
the theme song
Yeah.
to the sitcom about your
Yeah,
life?
yeah.
Oh, man. There's so many ways I could go with this. And I can't use CeeLo Green songs.
Or Limp Bizkit.
By the
Your
way,
band.
on the side note, I drew a card that I realized was not, well, maybe for some. No, I take that back. I was going to say I thought I found the card that broke the CeeLo Green hack.
Was it like the endearing song about your grandma? Because that would be a bad answer, probably.
What song is that?
The CeeLo Green song. That would be a bad
Does he have an endearing song about a grandma?
No, if that was the card.
Mm. I mean, man, I'm going to go with Money by Pink Floyd. It starts with all the cash registers ringing. And I'm just going to say that because I think that, like, ever since I can remember, I was always hustling in some regards, like all the way down to, like, being a little kid. By the way, my 5-year-old can now define what profit is.
It's not a man with a white beard.
No, we're really moving forward on that.
Yeah.
PJ, do you have an answer?
I will say live a life less ordinary.
And
Carbon Leaf.
Oh, wow. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I'm like literally voting blind. So I'm going to go with the guest and vote for PJ's answer.
I'm going with the Money.
Okay. It's up to you, man. Now, we could have a 3-way tie. No, wait. So I vote for
Yeah.
PJ. You vote for me.
If he votes for me, we have a 3-way tie.
What was the reason you liked shots again? You liked it?
Maybe I like going to the soccer games, and they always play it at the soccer games.
All right, we'll go 3-way.
Oh, dude. That was like an intentional tie.
Okay, now we all have to sing our songs.
No.
Okay, I think we just call it a tie and move on.
And mixtape the app.
It randomly
it would
picks.
no, it would eliminate someone and then do a revote.
No, I thought it just randomly.
It would
picked
someone would get cut. Now that is kind of random. I mean, how do you break a tie? So, all right. So as we kind of round out the stuff or this episode, how's your experience been with Launch KC and Black and Beach? Has that been?
Is fantastic. So, I like to say that it's hard to find a startup with a compelling, disruptive technology and a great business plan, right? But I would say it's much harder to find a large company willing to adopt a new technology, even if to some extent it's disrupting their own business, because large companies are designed to be more like a freighter. They're not supposed to.
They want to protect their turf.
They want to protect their turf. They don't want to change quickly. But I think Black and Beach has adopted a little bit of a of a willingness and an interest in saying, hey, you know, if we have to change things up to really get a sustainable competitive advantage 2 years down the road, we're going to try to be out in front of that before somebody else does. So I think it was fantastic, and we're lucky to be part of their first cohort. I'm sure they're going to do it again.
They have a whole bunch of stuff lined up. I mean, they got 3 of them going on right now, and you guys are just graduating.
Is it all over now?
No, I mean, it's kind of meant to be in perpetuity. Like, it goes on and on and on. Like, they're going to do some new stuff.
Well, like they just had the demo days last week.
They
right?
did,
So
and
does
that's
that
like
mean
graduation night, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
And then shit gets real.
Are these cohorts over?
That's a good question.
So it's officially over as part of the launch KC, but I think in every scenario, their whole point of the last few weeks is to figure out, okay, what do we do on November 14th? You know, what do we
it's never really over because the top level company has made an actual investment in these companies, and that's why I like the way that they switched that away from grants.
It's a great call.
Because grants, like, hey, here's some money, and I'm not saying that's bad, but here's some money. We're going to put you through a very short window of stuff that you may or may not pay attention to or even care about.
Right.
And instead, they hook you up with someone who has a vested interest in your success. And like, I was there at that night talking with you and someone from Black and Beach, and I could see the level of interest.
Yeah.
And just like the future planning that comes into that. And
they're not looking to do one small demo. They want to, they want to put their foot in the water before, they have a bunch of stuff flying around their thing. But then they want to do a full project demo, 6 months long, takes off every day. How does that work? They want to, they understand that working through FAA waivers, for completely autonomous flight, we're going to need to work through that. But at the end of the day, at some point, every project they have, this is going to be a line item on it.
Yep.
It's going to be in every project they do. That's the goal.
I hear you. So, and they're doing that with all the different stuff, at least the Black and Beach company is. And think about like how smart that is on their behalf, because they're engineering stuff, and if you can engineer your own companies into the solution later on, I mean, that's a great long play. I love that. And everyone that I've talked to that's in the clean tech one was really excited at the opportunity to work at Black and Beach. I think they're one of Kansas City's like real all-star, Hall of Fame, like super companies that a lot of people haven't heard of, because the like engineering and that part is not the part that you see with a skyscraper that's being built or a giant anything. And that's like, it's
not a consumer brand.
It's not. Well, I mean, I think if you grew up in Kansas City, you know it. So, all right. So we like to end all of our episodes with what we call the Founders Freestyle. We'll turn over the mic to each of us and kind of do a roundtable. PJ, I'll start with you. Before we do that, I do want to once again encourage everyone to go to awarevehicles.com. While you're there on the internet, check out all of our beautiful smiling faces. Yeah, there you go. On the Startup Hustle YouTube channel. If you want to check us out at Startup Hustle Podcast on the gram, we're there. While you're on the internet, check out some of our other companies like Stackify.com, Gigabook.com, and some of the other stuff that we do. So with that, sir, I will hand over the mic to you. You can say about whatever you want, to whoever you want, however you want.
Well, I would just say, there's so many people who say, man, it was so much easier 10 years ago, right? Or there's so much opportunity 10 years ago. Every industry I've been in, whether it's banking or any of the companies I've been in, and I can't think of a time when it's been more exciting than right now in terms of how many things are changing. The concept of integrating the drones with the imaging and the AI. 20 years from now, people are going to say, well, of course, what would you do? How else would you do it? Right, and the fact that it's not that way now is just mind-boggling. In some ways, once you get deeper in the weeds, you see that. And so I would say, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, don't think everything's been done before. It's literally the advances that we're making in general today, whether it's communications, whether it's the speed of software analytics, all the rest of this stuff, is opening up markets that is going to make us look like we didn't have cars. We look back 100 years and we're like, my goodness, they barely had cars. Model Ts were coming out then, right? And so it's going to look even probably an order of magnitude stranger in 100 years about today, sickness, healthcare, all the rest of it that it's going to be. So I don't know if it's more of a statement or a thought, but it's maybe a call to arms for any entrepreneur out there to find the technologies and take the risk, because you can really change the world individually and as a group.
Master Watson?
I think to add on to what you just mentioned, there's probably thousands of farmers that know that drones are helpful, and they're all like, man, if somebody could just fly this damn thing every day and tell me how many cows I have and which of my plants need to be looked at, that'd be great. Somebody needs to automate this shit, right? Somebody has to actually do it, right? Somebody's got to step up and say, you know what, I can solve that problem. And this is a recurring theme, to your point, in almost all industries, right? There are problems that need to be solved, and there's lots of people that are like, yeah, somebody needs to do that, but somebody actually has to do it, right? And so for this one, you've actually done it.
Yeah.
I think part of your struggle of your business as you go forward is this is a classic example of a business that could go very wide or very deep. You become the expert service at agriculture, and maybe even certain types of agriculture, right? Is it only cows, or is it only cornfields, or is it all agriculture, right? Or are you like chasing shiny objects? You're like, oh, we want to monitor oil fields, and we want to do this thing for car dealerships, and we want to do this thing for that, and this thing for that. And next thing you know, you're flying drones to the moon and back because you're trying to see if the other side of the moon is still dark every day, right? Like there's just so many things you could do, and that's the struggle a lot of startups have, is trying to focus. Where do you focus?
Sure.
So,
I think that, and those are great points. Thank you, Matt.
you're welcome.
Yeah, that's why we have you around.
Yeah.
But everything that both of these gentlemen said is really true. I think the thing that I'll close the show out with is I don't think people really understand the challenges that the world has in front of it. We're going to have 10 billion people on this planet in the next 20 years. We've got climate change issues. We have stuff like that. We have to grow more food and do it in the same amount of space, maybe even less space. And stuff like that. And it's a real challenge. And the thing is these kind of solutions, they just don't happen overnight. And the forward-thinking mentality of companies like Aware Vehicles has to exist otherwise there's going to be bigger, tougher problems. Like, think about all of a sudden there are no crops, or crops aren't doing what they need to do. It's pretty much like the science fiction scenario that could become a reality if certain things aren't occurring. And I think that, we record this podcast here in Kansas, and oftentimes the American farmer is very overlooked as being the most crucial part of you being alive. Like, because not only are they growing your food, they are growing your other food's food in a lot of situations. And that, that's so any solution that is related to ag tech and this kind of stuff, I think is really cool. I love the fact as well, kind of like Matt said, that you're using technology that exists to do things that matter, and don't assume that all these ideas are done. That was PJ on that. But it's sometimes you sit back, and I always joke, oh, there's no good ideas left, but I'm wrong. I am very wrong about that. So,
well, what's interesting about what you're doing is you didn't necessarily invent any of these things. You're just pulling them all together and creating a new recipe, right? You didn't invent the drones.
But that is an invention.
Yeah, but you didn't invent, artificial intelligence and machine learning and computer vision and, having a cellular access in the middle of the field. Like, you didn't invent any of these things, but you're able to put all of them together in the right formula to solve a problem.
It's like inventing a phone. You didn't invent the cable or the speakers or the things.
But that is an invention.
Yeah.
You can invent stuff with other stuff.
Just solving a problem.
Yeah.
Taking all these things off the shelf and putting them together and actually solving a problem.
Well, PJ, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I'm going to dedicate the rest of my day towards the AI bot that's going to defeat Watson at Mixtape.
Perfect.
See y'all next time.